When Senator J.D. Vance called Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett ghetto on national television, he expected outrage. Instead, she remained composed, locked eyes with the camera, and delivered a moment that would be remembered. You could sense a tension thick in the air, heavy and silent. Even before a word was spoken, 4 individuals sat at a sleek glass table, studio lights bouncing off their skin and nerves. The discussion was meant to center around economic progress in low-income areas, but like many live debates, it quickly went off track. Senator J.D. Vance was doing what he usually does, dominating the mic. He leaned in close, that rehearsed grin sitting beneath a furrowed brow, as if only he had the answers. "Let's be real," he said, flicking a hand in dismissal. "Throwing money at failing schools and calling it change, that is not real improvement." Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had said little until then, not because she lacked points, but because she understood these debates let them talk themselves into corners, then step in with facts. She waited for the right moment, then leaned toward the mic. "If by failing schools, you mean those starved of resources, neglected by the state, and left behind," she said, "then yes, let us pour money into them. Because communities stripped of support deserve restoration." The host shifted slightly, but she continued, "You call it handouts, but what you really mean is, if it does not look like your world, it does not deserve help, then it happened." J.D. Vance interrupted, his voice loud, eyes narrowed. "You are just being ghetto," he said. He said it lightly, almost like a casual comment, as if tossing in a quick remark, but it hit like a brick through glass. The atmosphere dropped. Panelists froze. The host blinked twice. Viewers at home paused mid-chew. You could almost hear countless remotes fall silent. It was not just the word, it was his tone. Like he reduced her entire identity into a slur wrapped as a side note. But Jasmine held firm. She took a breath, adjusted her mic calmly, and met the camera's lens with steady eyes. "I'm not shocked you said that," she began, her voice cool, but piercing. "Because when Black women speak with strength, when we challenge authority, we are not allowed to be confident, we get labeled." J.D. Vance shifted in discomfort. It showed he knew he had crossed a line, but there was no taking it back. "You hear ghetto," she said, "but I hear South Dallas. I hear survival. I hear my mother working double shifts, raising 3 children, still making it to PTA meetings with food stamps in her bag and pride in every step she took." That was the moment. Right then, that is when the clip started to go viral. Even before the show wrapped, the footage was trimmed, posted, retweeted, shared, stitched, subtitled. Some called her a queen. Others said she should have walked off the set. Many, especially Black women, simply said, "Thank you." The panel tried to move on, awkwardly shifting to student loan plans, but no one was paying attention anymore. The entire internet was focused on that single moment. Jasmine remained composed the rest of the way, but her hands said what her mouth did not. Fingers tapping the table, a rhythm of every word she chose not to say. She understood the game. She knew they were ready to paint her as the angry Black woman. They wanted that image, but she refused to give them the headline. Still, her point had already landed. People watching from Oakland, from Tulsa, from Tampa sat up straighter. Women who had been called ghetto in offices, at school pickups, in boardrooms, they nodded, blinking through that familiar sting behind their eyes. This was no longer about policy. It was deeper than politics. It was about the labels that follow you even after you succeed, even after you prove yourself, even when you are seated as a United States Congresswoman. And Jasmine Crockett peeled that label off, right there on live television with calm hands and a voice steady as steel. But what people did not see was everything that built up to that second. Before she was Congresswoman Crockett, she was just Jazz. No spotlight, no security, no tailored suits made for camera crews. Just a skinny girl with rough palms from helping her uncle fix brake pads in South Dallas heat. South Dallas did not teach through kindness. It did not whisper motivation. It gave lessons straight. You either learned to speak clearly, or you were drowned out by the chaos. Sirens, brake screeching, arguments on the corner, mothers yelling for their kids to come inside before the lights came on. Jazz had 2 sides to her life, one behind her front door, and one outside. At home, Her mom Marlene led with quiet strength. She never raised her voice, she did not need to. One look shifted the entire room. Marlene cleaned houses in Highland Park 6 days a week, came home with sore wrists, bleach marks on her hands, and barely enough energy to cook rice and chicken before sinking into the couch, church socks still on her feet. Outside, Jazz walked a tightrope too smart for some, too real for others. She wore off-brand shoes, a size too small, and a gel cap that made her scalp itch. Still, she stood tall. She learned early that people confuse survival with attitude. Some teachers focused on her tone, not her meaning. Even then, she noticed it. When she gave the right answer, some adults were irritated instead of impressed. Her first time being called ghetto did not come from a kid on the playground. It came from a substitute in 4th grade. She stood up in class to explain why Martin Luther King's work was not finished. Even though the worksheet said, "Mission accomplished," the teacher gave a quiet laugh and said, "Aren't you a little firecracker? Real ghetto fabulous." She did not even know what ghetto fabulous meant back then, but she knew it was not a compliment. Not the way it was said. When she told her mother at home, Marlene did not storm the school. She did not write an email. She just told her, "Next time, finish your thought and say it louder." That was all Jazz needed. In high school, she joined the debate team not because she liked arguing, but because she was tired of people acting like her words needed translation. She wanted to be clear, to say things in a way that could not be dismissed. She wanted to win not by shouting, but by making truth impossible to ignore. And she did. By the time she got to Prairie View A&M, people knew her not for her clothes, not for popularity, but for the way she challenged people and left them speechless, not angry. South Dallas never left her. She carried it to class, to courtrooms, and eventually, to Capitol Hill. It showed up in how she wore her hair, in how she asked questions others avoided, and in how she remembered the names people forgot. People told her to tone it down. "Do not be too bold," they whispered. "Do not wear that. Do not talk about where you come from." But she did not dim anything. She tuned in, listened closer, watched harder, because that badge where she came from, it carried stories. Real ones about girls like her who were passed over, about boys her age who never saw their 23rd birthdays, about mothers juggling 2 jobs and 2 bus transfers just to make a parent-teacher meeting. And when she spoke, it was never just for herself. She was speaking for all of them too. So when G.D. Vance threw that word at her on national TV, he did not just take a shot at her, he disrespected every Sunday hairpress, every after-school hustle, every bookshelf made from milk crates in every South Dallas home. But even lessons from childhood do not fully prepare you for what it feels like to face that moment on a national platform. By the time Jasmine Crockett finished law school, she already knew justice was not blind. It looked closely, especially at people like her. Her first job after graduating from Texas Southern's Thurgood Marshall School of Law was far from glamorous. No polished desks or televised meetings. She began in a cramped public defender's office in Shreveport, Louisiana, where the air conditioning barely worked, and the coffee machine was louder than the copier. But that is where she truly learned how justice, or the lack of it, actually worked. Every Monday, the waiting room filled with faces that looked like home cousins, uncles, old classmates, boys, arrested with tiny amounts of weed serving more time than white men with records, mothers losing their children because they could not pay for childcare, grandmothers blamed for fraud they did not even understand. Jasmine never got used to it, she just became sharper. In court, she spoke fast and clear. No fluff, no drama, just facts, thrown like punches you never saw coming. Judges leaned in when she talked. Even prosecutors who did not like her began to respect her work ethic. But it was not only courtroom fights that shaped her. What happened outside mattered too. Once, she got pulled over after court, still in her blazer and heels, briefcase on the seat next to her. The officer did not care, said she looked out of place, asked whose car it was. That is when it hit her. Degrees did not protect you. Playing by the rules did not save you. So she stopped trying to be accepted by systems that never welcomed her. She returned to Texas and opened her own practice. She defended renters being forced from their homes, helped clear the records of young people caught in the system too early, and stood beside women escaping violence with nowhere else to go. People noticed, not because she won every case, but because she showed up, not in tailored blazers or polished sound bites, but with time, effort, and real care. She remembered her clients' children's names. She called their mothers to explain every line of paperwork. She stayed late. She followed up, and the people talked. When a Dallas City Council seat became open, her name started getting mentioned. At first, she laughed it off. "I am not a politician," she would say, but deep down, she was already building more than a job. She was building trust. Then George Floyd was murdered. The air felt heavy with grief. The streets were packed with people done being quiet about injustice. Jasmine did not just join the protest. She represented those arrested. She got them released. She stood in court and said what needed saying even as judges rolled their eyes. That changed everything. A group of organizers came to her with a plan: run for state office, challenge the system from inside. She hesitated. Running meant cameras. It meant more judgment, more people calling her too bold, too black, too ghetto, behind closed doors. But she thought of her mother, the girls back home, and the courtrooms that failed them. She said yes. Her campaign was not the most funded, but it had energy. Volunteers knocked on doors in scorching heat. Teens handed out flyers after school. Elders donated $5 bills from grocery envelopes. She won. Then she won again. Eventually, she made it to the U.S. Congress, where her voice would reach even further. But the halls of power were not built for her either. She saw the stairs. She noticed the extra checks at security. She heard the comments. When she wore her natural hair or asked direct questions in meetings, they tried to shape her into something more acceptable. But Jasmine kept showing up exactly as she was. A South Dallas girl with courtroom strength and a memory that never forgot. That made her powerful. Still no degree, no bill, no title could fully protect her from what came next. When the show ended, the lights dimmed, and everyone left the set like nothing serious had just happened. The producers acted like they heard nothing. The makeup assistant gave her a quick smile and rushed away. Even the host avoided her gaze. Jasmine unclipped her mix slowly. Her hands were steady, but her stomach churned. She had been disrespected before in courtrooms, on social media, even by fellow lawmakers, but not like this. Not that word. Not in that moment. Not said so casually, with quiet venom in front of millions. "You are just being ghetto." It was not only what he said, it was how smoothly the words left his mouth, as if they had been waiting right there, sitting at the tip of his tongue, just waiting for the chance to come out. He said it without hesitation, without concern, like he believed it would land, maybe stop her in her tracks, maybe even get a chuckle from the audience watching at home. But it did not land the way he thought. Because he did not say, "Your argument is wrong," or "I disagree with your facts." He aimed directly at who she was, straight to identity, straight to the label. Jasmine sat quietly in the back of a rideshare, heading to her hotel, watching the moment play on her phone. The clip had already made it online, trimmed down to 30 seconds of heat. Her name was trending again. Her phone buzzed every few seconds. Mentions, reposts, DMs. She scrolled through them. Some cheered her on, some mocked. One tweet said, "This is why we do not let them on panels." That line stung more than the insult itself. Back at her hotel, she kicked off her shoes and exhaled. The room felt too quiet, too cold. She turned the TV on just for the sound. She flipped through the news. One channel had already started breaking down the moment. A middle-aged commentator said she had overreacted. Another smirked and claimed, "The word ghetto has changed meaning." She muted the screen. It would have been simple to type out a response. Her team was already messaging her, "We can write something right now." But Jasmine did not want to rush. Not this time. She sat at the edge of the bed, playing back her own words. "You hear ghetto, but I hear South Dallas." She had not raised her voice. She had not pointed fingers. She had not walked away. She answered with focus, with calm and purpose. And now she had to choose what came next. Jasmine pulled a yellow notepad from her bag, an old habit from her trial days. She jotted down thoughts, not bullet points, just fragments. Why is it called ghetto when I speak directly, but authentic when he shouts? Why do I need to dress like I'm going to church just to be seen as serious? Why do we pretend words like that do not mean what they always meant? She did not sleep that night. Not out of anger, but because she felt a responsibility. She knew too many young girls would see that clip. Too many teachers would play it in class. Too many mothers would tell their daughters, "This is why you have to stay calm no matter what they say to you." And she hated that. Because no man, senator or not, should have the power to reduce who you are in a moment and expect silence in return. By morning, her inbox had filled. Messages from civil rights lawyers, journalists, even a retired librarian who wrote, "You said what we never could." She sat near the window, watching the sun rise over Los Angeles, and she decided she would respond, but not the way people expected. Not a short clip, not a tweet, not a press conference filled with perfectly chosen lines. She would speak in her own voice, one shaped by barbershops, kitchen table conversations, and rides on public buses. Because this was not about clapping back anymore, this was about drawing a line and making sure no one crossed it again. But going viral comes with a cost, especially for a black woman. They expected her to disappear for a few days, to let the moment pass, to let the anger fade, like it always did. Some advisors even said it would be wiser to stay quiet. Let the media cycle move on, one suggested. Do not give it more attention. But Jasmine had learned something a long time ago in courtrooms and community halls. Silence does not protect you. It just lets someone else tell your story for you. And this time, she was not going to let that happen. By the second day, news outlets had already twisted the story a dozen different ways. A conservative blog used the headline, "Crockett overreacts, plays race card on live TV." One evening anchor used air quotes when calling her aggressive. Social media was full of edited clips the insult removed, making her look like she had gone off for no reason. But they misjudged something. People were watching the full version, not just the cuts, not just the spin. And when they did, they saw a woman stay composed after being insulted. They saw control gray strength without yelling. By the third day, something unusual began to happen. People who usually avoid politics started to speak up. A retired judge from Des Moines shared on Facebook, "If you think Jasmine Crockett stepped out of line, you have clearly never watched black women in courtrooms being forced to smile while being disrespected." A high school principal in Fresno played the clip in his civics class, asking students to write reflections. Half the girls used Jasmine's line about her mother food stamps in her bag and pride in her walk. And a young activist from Albuquerque tweeted to the video on TikTok saying, "I do not know her personally, but this moment spoke to us." Celebrities weighed in. A Grammy-winning artist tweeted, "Do not ever let anyone shame you for where you come from. Congresswoman Crockett, we see you." An actor wrote on Instagram, "This is exactly why we need representation." Handled it with more calm than I probably would have. But even stronger were the stories filling her inbox. Long emotional notes from women who had faced being called gay, unprofessional, too emotional. One woman said, "I work in change how I speak every day just to seem acceptable. Watching you stand your ground made me cry during lunch." Another message came from a grandmother in Mississippi who said she never finished school, but raised 3 daughters who all became teachers. "You reminded me of them. You reminded me that keeping your head high is still an act of strength." But not everyone was praising her. Criticism got louder in other spaces. Conservative voice claimed she was using identity politics. Others mocked her for being proud of her background, as if being proud of your roots meant weakness. Then came the quiet pushback. A congressional staffer leaked that some lawmakers were discussing her behavior behind the scenes. The report claimed she might be too controversial for future leadership positions. She was not surprised. She had seen this happen before in law, in politics, in everyday life. Black women were not allowed to speak up. They were expected to take it, move on, and not make a scene. If they responded even calmly, they were angry. If they stayed composite, they were called fake. Jasmine was not pretending anything. She was showing what it is like to survive in public. Her team arranged an interview, not with a big cable show, but with a local station in Fort Worth where she used to visit her cousins. She picked that outlet on purpose because this was not just a national issue, it was personal. When the reporter asked about the criticism, Jasmine did not avoid it. I have heard all my life that I am too much, she said. Too direct, too emotional, too bold, too black, too ghetto. And I am done apologizing for any of it. She leaned in slight line it for drama, but to be clear, if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they should ask themselves, Wibbit. The bigger moment came when she finally responded publicly 3 days after what happened. Jasmine Crockett sat in a small room with sunlight coming in, a basic webcam, no fancy lights, and a chipped mug by her Sedino. Big production, no prepared speech, just her voice. A plain shy random message she needed to say in her own words. The video began with no music or intro. Before I say anything, she said, I want to be clear, was not planning to respond like this, but I read your messages, I have heard your stories, and this is no longer just about meat. Was not a press statement or a comeback. It was something different, more honest, like a talk at the kitchen table. After the world just hit you hard, and you are still deciding whether to cry or finish cooking. She did not name GD Vance, not once. She did not need to have heard words like ghetto, unprofessional, angry my entire life. She said, and I used to think if I dressed nicely, spoke gently, earned my degrees, won elections, that one day those words would stop following me, but they do not. They just appear in different forms. Paused and let the silence sit. I was not upset because I have never been. Getwa was upset because I have. And I understand what that word means. When you say it that way, it is not just a word. It is a trap, a way to hold someone back before they even tried. Comments came in right away. Thousands every minute. Teachers talking about their students' mothers showing their daughters the video. Men saying they had never realized how deep that word could cute until now. But what made her message different was that it did not just defend Hirsch, open the door to a bigger conversation. I'm not asking for pity, she said near the end. I'm asking for truth, because unless we are honest about who gets labeled and why, we are just hiding the same old disrespect in different language. The video hit 1 million views in less than 2 hours. By the evening, churches were playing it for youth events. A group of nurses in Milwaukee watched it together during break. It got played on sports radio, in schools, in family chats. It was no longer only a political issue. It became more than just a political moment. It turned into a cultural one. The following morning, a pastor in Cleveland preached a sermon titled Dignity in the Fire, drawn directly from Jasmine's words. In Detroit, a hairstylist told a local news outlet, she said, everything we've been holding inside, and she said it clearly. In Tallahassee, a youth basketball coach paused practice, gathered his team, and played the clip over a Bluetooth speaker. He told them, this is how you stand tall when someone tries to tear you down. Even journalists who had not paid much attention before began quoting her. But none of this was how Jasmine knew the moment had truly landed. She knew because of a single text message. It came from a woman named Clarice in Amarillo. No checkmark, no big following, just a screenshot of her 12-year-old daughter standing at the table holding a printed quote from Jasmine. The text said her daughter planned to use it for a school speech. The message simply read, "Thank you for saying it out loud." And in that moment, alone in her office, Jasmine felt something. It was not pride or relief, but a deep sense of duty. Because when you speak up with calm strength and let your words go beyond the moment, it stops being about winning an argument. It becomes about who hears you and who stands taller because you refuse to shrink. She leaned back in her chair, folded her hands, and finally took a breath. Not because it had ended, but because something bigger had just begun. What followed was not a headline, it was a reckoning. At first, GD Vance brushed it off. He gave no apology, no clarification. In fact, the morning after the debate, he went further. During a radio interview, some people are too sensitive these days, he said. If that is offensive, maybe politics is not for her. He tried turning it into a story of toughness, that he was just being honest, and she took it the wrong way. But this was no longer just a debate moment, it had become a cultural turning point, and people were paying attention. By week's end, it was not only voters watching. Sponsors for his book tour quietly began pulling back. A university in Oregon canceled a planned appearance, citing feedback from the community. a tech conference in Seattle removed him from a keynote panel. One of the organizers tweeted, "We cannot invite black women to speak and then give a platform to someone who disrespects them like that on national television." His team rushed to respond, releasing a short, vague statement. He respects his colleagues and regrets any confusion, but the damage was spreading. And this time, it was not just about feelings, it was about what his reaction revealed. And what it said about the spaces where voices like Jasmine's have to fight to be taken seriously. Behind the scenes, congressional aides started leaking details that showed how much friction this had caused. In one private meeting, a senior advisor reportedly told him, "You just made things harder for all of us. This will not fade." Then something unusual happened. Two Republican colleagues released public statements criticizing his remarks. Neither used his name, but both spoke about the need for respectful conversation and the harm of racially dismissive language. It was not a flood of criticism, but it was enough to show that the ground beneath him was beginning to shift. More than headlines, it was everyday people who kept the conversation going. People in Ohio began writing letters not just to his office, but to local papers. One high school senior wrote an opinion piece for the Toledo Blade titled, "Why My Congressman Should Apologize to Jasmine Crockett." She wrote, "I have grown up hearing that how I talk, dress, or even walk is called ghetto. But no one ever explains what that means. They just use it to make us feel smaller. Jasmine Crockett showed me I do not have to shrink." Her article went viral. Vance, for once, went quiet. His public schedule was reduced. Press interviews were canceled. He even stopped posting on Twitter. His core supporters stood by him, but the broader public mood had shifted. Something about this exchange stayed with people in a way he clearly did not expect, because it was not just the words, it was what they revealed. People were tired of watching black women lead with excellence, strength, and grace only to be pulled down with a single word meant to belittle. And Jasmine? She did not gloat. She did not post reaction clips or demand an apology. She stayed focused. She kept doing her work. She kept showing up. In fact, when reporters asked her during a press gaggle if she had any message for Vance, she looked up from her notes and said quietly, "I already said it, and I said it clearly the first time." Then she walked away. But by then, the impact had already reached him. And the truth was, no talking point could make people forget that clip. And silence could undo what the public had seen. The label he tried to stick on her ended up clinging to him instead, not because of a single exchange, but because it exposed something deeper, something that had gone on too long. Still, Jasmine did not stop to celebrate. She turned her attention forward. 2 weeks later, Jasmine Crockett stood in front of a crowd. It happened quietly, in a high school gym in Tulsa, Oklahoma. No media, no reporters, just metal chairs and the faint smell of floor wax and popcorn from a nearby vending machine. The girls in the audience had all kinds of expressions: curious, skeptical, distracted, tired. Some whispered, some played with their hair. But one thing Jasmine had learned over time: young people know when you are pretending. So, she did not. She began with honesty. "I am not here to lecture you. I am not here as someone from television," she said. "I am here because I know what it is like to sit in a room and feel like no one thinks you're paying attention." That made them listen. She shared stories from her childhood in South Dallas, being the only black woman in courtrooms, being dismissed in meetings and smiled at with that same fake politeness. And yes, she told them about what happened when Vance called her ghetto on national television. The gym grew quiet. One girl in the back raised her hand and asked, "How did you not curse him out?" Half joking, half impressed. The room chuckled. Jasmine smiled gently. "Because I was not speaking to him," she said. "I was speaking to you. I was speaking to every girl who's been told to lower her voice, be less, smile more. If I had reacted with anger, they would have ignored what I said and only focused on how loud I said it. So I gave them words they could not ignore." Another student, Isabel, asked what she would tell her younger self if she could go back. Jasmine looked around at all the faces, so many shades, so many stories. "I would tell myself this," she said. "You do not earn respect by changing who you are. You claim it by standing just as you are. The students clapped. Some even stood up. Afterward, a girl named Kiara quietly approached. While others took selfies or crowded around snacks, Kiara stood still, holding a small notebook. "I write poems," she said, "but I stopped. Someone told me they sounded too ghetto." Jasmine opened the notebook and flipped through. What she read was real, raw, honest, powerful. "Kiara," she said softly, "this is what ghetto sounds like." "Then the world needs to listen." They hugged. No one took photos. No trending tag followed. But that small exchange was why Jasmine had come. Later that night, flying back to Washington, she thought about that word again. Ghetto.it had always been used to insult, to confine, to judge. But now, she saw something else. That one word had finally forced a conversation people had been avoiding. For years, respectability had been a tightrope: talk a certain way, dress a certain way, behave a certain way, and maybe, just maybe, you would be allowed at the table. But what if that table was never meant for you? What if reaching for respect meant giving up your truth? That is what G.D. Vance did not understand. His insult had nothing to do with style. It was about identity. He wanted her to shrink. She stood taller instead, and when she did, others who had been holding themselves small finally stood too. Not because she had power, but because she gave them something harder to find: permission. Permission to speak with your own voice. To wear what your mother taught you was right. To show up fully in spaces that were never made for you. To take your place without apology. And yet, one more moment was waiting. 1 year later, almost to the day, she was invited back on air live. Same network, same format, same sleek glass table, and yes, the same co-panelist. G.D. Vance was scheduled again. This time, the discussion was about national housing policy, but everyone knew what people were really watching for. The producers did not say it out loud, but it was clear in the prep notes. Crockett versus Vance Part 2. Her team was hesitant. "You owe them nothing," one advisor said. "You already made your point." But Jasmine saw it differently. "This is not about him," she said. "It is about every girl who is still paying attention." She stepped into the studio in a burnt orange suit. Confident and unapologetic, her hair was styled in tight coils, pinned just enough to reveal small gold studs in her ears. There was no dramatic entrance, no big return, just presence, and a message that stayed with her like armor. The show began. The host made light conversation, polite, but clearly masking the tension underneath. G.D. kept glancing her way, waiting for something, maybe a clash, maybe a headline moment. But Jasmine was not there for theatrics. The discussion stayed focused on policy. She explained the facts, pointed out inconsistencies, and stood her ground. Her tone stayed steady, but each word landed with weight. Then came the moment. Mid-conversation, G.D. leaned in and said, "Look, Congresswoman Crockett, I'm sure your community cares, but I do not think turning this into an emotional topic helps anyone." That was it. Not as blunt as ghetto, but the message was familiar. A polished version of the same dismissal, the same coded remark. Jasmine paused just a second and then, without moving in her chair, replied, "You keep calling it emotional when I talk about housing, but that is because you have never had to live next to a payday loan store and a liquor shop instead of a proper grocery store. You think it is emotional. I call it lived experience." The room fell silent. The host attempted to change the topic, but it was too late. The moment had already made its mark. G.D. leaned back, visibly shaken, and for once, had nothing to say. Within 10 minutes, the clip was all over social media, but this time, it was more than just what she said, it was how she commanded the space. She did not shout. She did not act. She simply made it clear she would not be pushed aside. After the show, reporters followed up, eager for a statement. "Any thoughts on Senator Vance?" they asked. She smiled. "I believe the record speaks for itself." That night, in her office back in Washington, she sat reading emails. One stood out. It was from a father in Missouri. "My daughter saw your segment tonight. She told me she wants to be the kind of woman who speaks like you, calm, strong, and sure. Thank you." She read it again, because this was never about winning a back and forth with G.D. Vance. It had always been about something greater, about changing what power is supposed to look like, about shifting who gets to be heard, about proving that grace is not weakness and that staying composed does not mean staying quiet. Jasmine had not just answered an insult, she had redefined the way the room worked, not by shouting, but by refusing to shrink. So next time someone watches a woman like Jasmine Crockett, confident, honest, and unapologetically bold, and thinks she is too much, they might remember that moment, that answer, that presence, and realize it is not too much. That is what true leadership looks like. If you believe your voice matters, even when it trembles, hit subscribe, because silence has never changed a thing.